Yes, everyone, you know what time it is. It's your boy Jack and Dave here, and we're going to be giving you our sort of thoughts on the Ange Postecoglou rumors. And it's not as much of an evening headlines or news update. It's actually just sort of answering a bit of the skepticism, a bit of sort of I guess, the initial reactions to these sort of rumors around Ange Postecoglou. He does look to be the front runner, and Spurs fans don't seem to be too happy. I figured maybe we play sort of a bit of bad cop and good cop, or good cop, bad cop with Ange here. And Dave is going to be playing the good cop, going to be playing his supporter, and I'm going to be playing kind of, I would say, a skeptical or at least naive, or at least someone who doesn't really know too much about Ange Postecoglou at the end of the day. And I'm kind of eager to learn more, but also, like I said, have a bit of my reservation. So everybody, if you do enjoy this video, feel free to hit that like button. But Dave, might as well just get started with the initial sort of questions when it comes to it. Ange Postecoglou is seen as sort of an underwhelming manager by a lot of sort of people around the Spurs fan base. Let's start with maybe one of the more common lines that I'm seeing is, "We can do better than Big Ange." What would you say to that?
Yeah, Jack, look, we say that, but let's actually delve deep into some of the names that are actually or have been on the list, or that the fan base have sort of said, yeah, we'd like to take a gamble on. So you look at, for instance, De Zerbi, Sassuolo and Shakhtar before he went to Brighton. You look at Thomas Frank, Denmark youth settle, Brøndby, Brentford under 21 manager and assistant, then manager. Graham Potter, Östersunds in Sweden, then on to Swansea, then on to Brighton. Vincent Kompany, Anderlecht, Burnley, Slot, AZ, Feyenoord. So for me, when you look at the names that many Spurs fans have been willing to get behind, none of them have actually really got any much more experience than what I would say Big Ange does. So for me, I don't understand why it's underwhelming to people when you look deeper into the history of some of the managers that many fans would actually get behind if they got here.
Another question I have for you, Dave, is could there be a bias a bit against Big Ange? Because he's not from one of the big footballing nations, and is actually, from what you could say, is one of the less historic footballing nations, in fact, in the case of Australia, or in our case, the United States as well. So do you feel like there's maybe just a bit of bias as well, considering where he's from?
Oh, 100% there is, Jack. You gotta be honest about it. He's not from what you would call a traditional footballing nation, like an Argentina, like a Brazil, like an England, Spain, Germany. If he was called Postatici, if he was called Posterman, people would be absolutely all over it. But because he's from Australia, that goes against him. And it is sort of like a bias that I see. It's because he's not historically from a big footballing nation, and that's why there isn't that massive hype around him. That's why there isn't that massive media attention around him. It's sort of, for me, it's a bit of snobbery, footballing snobbery, if you'd like to be honest with you, because like we pointed out, he's not too much more experienced than other managers that have been linked are not too much more experienced than an Ange Postecoglou. You got to look at it that, yes, because he's not from one of them historic and big footballing nations, there is a biasry against him. There is almost snobbery against him, 100%. I'll stand by that.
Another question I have for you here, Dave, is plenty would say he's only done it at Celtic, and being successful in the Scottish League doesn't necessarily actually make you a good manager. You look at Steven Gerrard as kind of a recent case. What would be your response to that?
Look, 100%. I hear that argument, but people got to look at what he was brought into Celtic to do, what he was tasked to do. Now, he came in, his predecessor was Neil Lennon. Now, with Neil Lennon, it is more so sort of defense first, counter-attacking football. It's more pragmatic football from Neil Lennon. And he had to come in and sort of completely change the way Celtic play football, but also change the age of that squad. And he'd done that, spending a lot less than what Rangers did down the road, with a few smart signings from the J-League. And he went on and pushed Celtic on to become a double-winning team. So for me, when he first came to Celtic, Jack, he got the same reaction from the media, from the fans. Rangers fans were bantering Celtic fans like, who's that guy? You had Alan Brazil, famously of TalkSport, absolutely ridiculed the appointment. And at the end of the season, once Ange Postecoglou let his football team do the talking, he actually famously came out and apologized. So for me, I get what they're saying about Ange Postecoglou, and I get what they're saying about, he's only done it at Celtic. Can you compare that to the Premier League? But again, you got to look more into the job. And at Tottenham, we want someone to come in and change from a pragmatic style that's been implemented at this club for 4 years to a more on the front foot style of football. And that is exactly what Ange Postecoglou is going to do in that regard. And, you look at it, Scott Brown was club captain at Celtic for more than a decade. He also left. So Ange had to sort of form a new leadership group, a new captain. Now, Hugo Lloris has had the captaincy since 2016. He's now leaving this summer. So you're going to need a new leadership group, a new captain. And Ange Postecoglou has demonstrated at Celtic that sort of what we're looking for a manager to come in here and do now at Tottenham, he's done at Celtic on a shoestring budget.
You're only as experienced as you are, I think, too. And that's another thing people have to consider, right? Is the jobs that he's done pretty exceptional at. And he's been able to turn teams around. He's been able to work with what is ultimately maybe not the most talented of players, not the most skilled of players. And he's been able to produce some pretty attractive football out of it. And he's also, I think, as well, been able to take various sort of the backroom staffs with him, and he's also been able to make it work kind of just no matter where he goes at various countries around the world. And there is something, I think, to that, and that's something that probably gets, I think, weirdly bashed on him. It's at the fact that he's played or managed in only Japan, Australia, and the likes of Scotland is sort of used against him. But you could also look at it the other way around in the case that he's also traveled to all of these different countries around the world and kind of still instilled, right, a winning philosophy and an attractive style of football with different types of players and different types of talent pools, etc. And again, he's not really done it really with world-class players yet, which I'll get onto later. Maybe could also be seen as a bit of a criticism towards him. But Dave, maybe speaking of criticism, there was plenty of criticism towards the likes of a certain Antonio Conte. Do you feel like maybe he would answer some of those criticisms that was brought up, against Conte, or is he going to maybe still poise, as some problems himself?
No, look, I urge fans to look back to when they wanted Antonio Conte out, to sort of, remember why you wanted Antonio Conte out in the first place, and not just fans. What came out about the players in the squad, what they wanted from a new manager coming in here. So if we take them reasons, let's go through them and see if Ange Postecoglou, ticks them boxes. So the first one, Jacko, we wanted to change from the defensive counter-attacking, boring football to attacking football. Great. Cut that little part. So, Jacko, many fans, they wanted to change from that boring, counter-attacking, defensive sort of football, and they wanted a manager that come in here, play on the front foot, free-flowing, attacking football and getting back to what we're good at. Ange Postecoglou offers that. Now, Jack, I know you might have a little rebuttal about that near the end, about maybe the amount of goals that his team's leaks. I get that, but we'll get on to that, maybe then. But Ange Postecoglou, he ticks that box. He will play that brand of exciting on the front foot football and getting back to what Tottenham are good at, getting back to the DNA. So many fans, when Antonio Conte was here, they didn't like the defensive counter-attacking, boring football that we were playing. Ange Postecoglou would bring an attacking brand of football, and that's what he's been well known for with all the teams he's played, everywhere he's been. Over in Australia, famously, his team were known as Brisbane Roar-Salona. In the J League, Yokohama Marinos, he took from a relegation team to win the league in a great style of football. And at Celtic, he also changed from the nil-ending style of football to a great attacking brand of football that they play no matter where they go. So many fans wanted that from the next managerial appointment. Ange Postecoglou brings that. Box ticked. You go on to another thing that was a criticism of Conte, that his tactics, and this also came out from the players, that especially in the week, they wanted the players to sort of train and learn how to defend, stop the opposition, and all his tactics were geared to the opposition and focusing on how to stop them rather than focusing on our strengths. Ange Postecoglou will put that straight out the window, and it's all focused on us, our attacking movements, patterns of plays, people not constantly moving, not standing around, high energy, focusing on what we're good at, using, looking at the qualities of our squad and playing to that, which is our forward line. And Ange Postecoglou will bring that. So another box ticked. Everyone wanted a modern day manager who can get players on board to do what he wants, that can, speak to them nicely, tuck them into bed at night time, all of that. Well, if you go back and look at Ange Postecoglou's record at all the clubs he's been at, he's been able to get not every single player, but he's been able to, at every single club, get the majority of the players to buy into exactly what he wants them to do. And you've got a question, how does he do that? Well, obviously, he's got great man management skills. Even in training, if you go and listen to Ange Postecoglou mic'd up, listen to even when he was criticizing the player. He's like, you've got to be tougher, you've got to be quicker there. But then he counters it with a positive, and he's like, you've got that in you. We know you can do it. So even the way he man manages people, constantly encouraging them to play the right way. Again, box ticked. So for me, Jack, I think there's plenty of positives that people wanted when Antonio Conte was here that Ange Postecoglou will bring. So I don't get where a lot of the skepticism comes around that either, to be honest with you. And also, lastly, we didn't want a manager that people thought was doing Tottenham a favour, i.e. a Jose, i.e. a Conte. Maybe Nagelsmann would have thought that as well. Well, Ange Postecoglou won't be thinking that he's doing Tottenham a favour, I can tell you that.
That's a very good final point there, right? Everybody wanted a manager that wants to be here, that wants to take on the Spurs job with two hands and be happy to be here, be proud to be here, and even take it on with some sort of recognition of this is still a massive club and this still has a lot of respect that needs to come with it. And you have to treat the job with the respect. And of course, Ange Postecoglou, I think, is probably out of most of the managers the guy that you guarantee is going to be that sort of guy. He doesn't really have any sort of affiliations or biases or, anything like, we're going to use it as a leapfrog, to another club or anything like that, sort of manner. Like he's going to go into it, fully invested. And that's definitely something that a lot of people, I think, originally, right, like you said, when Conte was first sacked, labeled that as a big criticism towards Conte. And whether it's true or not, I think it's something that, Ange Postecoglou is going to do differently than Conte. That's for sure. I like that point that you made.
And I just like, take yourself out of the immediate situation of why many people may consider it underwhelming, but actually think back to just what you were asking for when Antonio Conte was here, and simply look into Ange Postecoglou and the job he's done elsewhere and see, does that tick your boxes?
I just kind of maybe wanted to do a bit of a wrap up, a bit of a summary here. I made up a pros and cons list here for you, Dave, and maybe you can just sort of let me know whether you think it's sort of accurate to some degree. Let's look at maybe some of the pros, some of the things that you brought up, first. And I guess maybe what we can get from him is that it's guaranteed attacking football at all costs, from what I gathered and from what I've seen too. Celtic, they really do have a license to shoot. They create a lot of chances. They're able to sort of threaten teams, and it looks by his side in the Champions League, maybe what let them down was actually just finishing. Really, it wasn't exactly lack of chances. It was really just a lack of quality finishing, and maybe just a lack of quality in the final thirds in some moments. But is that really down to the coach? Not always. So what would you maybe say with that first point, Dave? Are we going to be guaranteed some sort of attacking football at all costs?
Yeah, 100%, Jack. He will, like he says it himself, that he will, change up the formation and stuff like that. He'd be able to impact during games by doing that, but he'll never abandon his overall philosophy or style of play. And just on the Champions League run, I think, look, it's a fair criticism of the guy. We got to be honest with it. But, many Celtic fans would say it's the best football they've ever watched Celtic play in the Champions League, better than watching Neil Lennon's Pragmatic. And, many would say they actually gave a lot of them teams a run for their money. But what actually won out in the end? It's just the overall quality of the player.
I like that answer. Has succeeded, with lesser quality players. And maybe what you just brought up there just sort of ties in well, right? The fact that he's been able to instill such exciting, attractive football with what you would say is not the most talented players in the world at the end of the day, Dave. And he's done it, like you said, at Yokohama Marinos. He's been able to do it in Australia with the youth team. He's been able to do it in the A-League itself over there. And he's been able to do it with the likes of Celtic, or who maybe you could say is his most talented set of players that he's ever worked with, if I'm not mistaken. So just the fact that he's been able to, let's say, make this sort of attractive football work with what is, at the end of the day, lesser talented players than what other managers have to work with.
Yeah, 100%. And that's, for me, what you can't really argue with. Like, somewhere along the line, you would like to look at it and say, well, hang on, why wasn't he able to implement it here, there, or there? But you can't. He's done it everywhere he's been, which shows and highlights how good of an actual man manager is,
Mm-hmm.
and if people actually go and do a lot of research into him and his sort of coaching style and his man management style, it's again what they ask for. Someone that's going to encourage people, someone that's going to constantly encourage people to play the right way, someone that's going to be firm but fair, someone that's not going to think they're too big for the club. But the reason why he gets a lot of players on board, Jack, is especially at Celtic, is when he initially came in, the noise was absolutely incredible around him. Like I said, everyone was mocking him, laughing at him, this, that, and the other. But what he done is he let all the fans and the media create the chaos over there. And over here, behind the scenes, he brought all the staff, management, coaches, players, everyone together. Look what they're doing to us. It's us against them. And he created that environment. He created that culture. Then he also starts talking about the legends that surround the club. And then he sort of, fans love that, but then it's sort of put to the players. When we talk about these greats, if you want to be in that conversation, go out there and do it. And then that then creates the common goal for everyone at that football club, which is to recreate greatness. And coming to Tottenham, he'll already be well versed in a lot of our legends and a lot of our greats that we already have. I wouldn't be surprised to hear him mention the likes of Bill Nick, people like that, to sort of get fans on side, but also lay down a gauntlet to some players. Like, you want to be adulated like these greats, but go out and do it.
The reason I kind of brought up the fact that it's a pro that he's been able to make it work with lesser talented players is because some of the other managers that we've either had in the past or managers that we've been linked with have really only made it work or have really only been used to, at least recently, to some of the best talents in the world, like some of the best players, and they need super technically gifted players, right, in certain positions in order to make it work, which means it requires top dollar and top investment in order for their sides and their 11s to be competent. Whereas you look at Ange Postecoglou, he's been able to work with what is much less of money, much more kind of, you could say, realistic budgets in some sense, and has been able to make again his teams look attractive. And it's not guaranteed that it translates well to the Premier League, but he has made it work again without needing some 60 million center back or anything like that. That's something I think I brought up with that
Just
pro.
on that, Jack, you also highlighted, look what he got out of Joe Hart and Cameron Carter-Vickers. Players deemed not good enough to be at Tottenham, but at Celtic, he's got the absolute most out of them. If anyone actually listens to the Fozcast by Ben Foster, he had Joe Hart on. And, Joe Hart spoke about the way some managers treated him, but then spoke about, the conversation he had with Ange Postecoglou and how he ended up at Celtic. And, he was just mesmerized by the lad. And because Ange Postecoglou, the first conversation he had with him, it was not, like he was saying, other managers were having conversations about, are you still in good shape? You come in here, you compete. But Ange Postecoglou says, no, you're my guy. You still got it. And I want to get you back to your best. How do we do that? And it's his man management. That's how he gets the best out of lesser players. It's very similar to what Harry Redknapp used to do, Jack, where you sort of just get to know the guy, you inflate their ego, you constantly tell them they're good regardless of all the noise around them, and that's how you get the best out of them.
I like it. And then it looks like he can repair fractions in the squad. He's a charismatic guy, and I'm a sucker to the charismatic managers. I really am. And it looks like Ange Postecoglou, out of all the managers we've been linked with, probably checks the box the most when it comes to sort of the charisma and the likability, just sort of as a person. I think when you looked at the whole list of managers, which one would you like to grab a beer with? I think it's definitely Ange. But can he repair the fractions that exist in the Spurs squad, Dave? By the looks of things, he can, because he did that when he inherited the job at Celtic. And I believe probably he did that when he maybe inherited the job over at Yokohama Marinos. And I know it sounds like a crazy thing to bring up, but again, like you brought up, a relegation sort of standard squad that he was able to turn into a winning, title winning sort of team. And so it shows in some sense he's able to turn around sides and repair fractions in some sense.
Look, he'll walk in straight away, he'd get them into training. He'll know who the fakers are. He'll know who the real ones are. And you watch, he'll start weaning out them fakers. And he'll start, but this is again, Jack, he's still going to need to bring players in here to be able to change that culture. You look at what he done at Celtic. He brought in 3 or 4 lads from the J League, and he sort of changed that culture around Celtic, where they came in, they were little whippets. Technically, they were better than a lot of what the Celtic players already had. And all of a sudden, it sort of dragged everyone up to that standard. And for me, he's going to need to do that at Tottenham, where in certain positions, he's going to need to bring in a couple of players that are better than what we've got. And then all of a sudden, there's no excuse for everyone else to start lounging around. Everyone has to pull their weight because this is the direction the club is going in. But mostly he gets them on side. So he'll walk straight in there and he'll identify one or two players. He'll be like, this is why this group is like this. Out you go. Smart
And
man.
then on to the cons here. He hasn't exactly worked with world-class players as of yet. And what I do mean by that is world-class sort of players come with, those sort of personalities, the status, the egos, maybe the preferences that they prefer their kit to be a certain way, right? They prefer to play in certain positions. They need the M&Ms, in the jar. They can't have any green ones in it, those type of guys. They do develop that sort of type of ego. And I'm not saying that Harry Kane or Sonny might have it, but you could say that they probably have a bit of sort of, gravitas to them that makes them think they're quite full of themselves to some degree. And can Ange come in here and tell Harry Kane what to do and tell Sonny what to do? And will they actually listen to him and will they actually take him seriously is the question.
Yeah, I think they will, Jacko. I think, look, with Postecoglou, he's a very charming guy, but he also has that air of arrogance, but a bit of bollocks around him as well. And, they're the first people he'll go in and try to look to get on side and buy into what he's doing. And all he'll do is just simply explain, like, look, we want to win trophies. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to play to your strengths, this, that, and the other. And then, he's not going to alienate them. It's not like he's going to go in and say, look, you're doing this, but you're doing it wrong, and I want to do this. And that's where you sort of create problems. He'll just go in and play up to their strengths and say, look, you're the stars of my team. Everything's going to come through you. Straight away, he'll get them on side. Now, where the problem is players that have egos that don't deserve to have egos. For me, that's the biggest problem at Tottenham Hotspur. Can he deal with that? I'm not quite so sure. I do think it could come to a head. He's a fiery character at times as well.
Guys who think they're better than what they are. That's a great point.
But they won't play. I can guarantee you that they will not play.
And we'll see how he's able to handle it with these type of egos and personalities. Little experience versus top managers in football. The list that I brought up is that he's only really played, some of the top managers only twice. Carlo Ancelotti's only played twice. Marco Rosa is another manager. He's only played twice. And then I think it was Manuel Pellegrini is one of the other ones. Joachim Löw, I believe, was another guy that he came up against. But these are managers he's only played twice. So he's not exactly, has a huge CV against, top managers. And when you're in the Premier League, you are coming up against very good managers sort of week in, week out. Can he handle those sort of, tactical battles, week in, week out, Dave, considering the fact that, I'll be honest, he does not have the resume, to show that he comes up against these guys on a regular basis?
No, look, that is one of my biggest concerns, Jack. That when you come to the Premier League, it's very tactical. Does he have the answers to be able to deal with them tactics? Look, that's a big question mark over him. What I will say is that if he does send out a team to play one way, although he may not change the sort of what he's asking them to do in terms of attack, what he will do is change formation to try and adapt to getting a foothold in the game and stuff like that. But look, Jack, he's one of them. All I can say is, again, a bit like Harry Redknapp, you go out and you just give it a go. If they're going to score 4, we're good enough to score 5. And, for me, look, we got to understand that, there's going to be a little period of this, in order to be able to transition fully into an attacking, a full threat attacking team that can also defend. It's going to take a little bit of transition. And at Celtic, his teams do concede a lot of goals as well, which is also a concern. And against top teams like City and Liverpool, does that then become 6-7 and you end up getting slapped?
Yeah.
That then becomes a danger. And that is one area where I do have my reservations of Ange. But what I will say, with Australia, he was well able to punch above his weight. He ended up getting a couple of results against Holland and stuff like that. But they were more 3-3 games rather than 1-0s or 2-1s or stuff like that. They were very open games. And that's what you're going to see a lot of when he comes in here. You're not going to see us rock up to these places and look to contain them and hit them on the counter, which you would argue was what actually one of the assets of having a Jose Mourinho or Conte here, that we always got the better of City, and especially in them sort of big games of teams that come and play on the front foot football, because we locked up and hit them on the counter. But then, you look against the rest of the Premier League, you're actually going to have a team that actually goes out and attacks at all costs, which is what Spurs fans want to see against them teams, compared to what we've seen with the negative side of an Antonio Conte or Jose Mourinho, where it's sort of, again, we still play the same way and it's not as effective, and
Right.
then games become tedious to watch.
And then that leads me well into the sort of doesn't really have a plan B has kind of been labeled against him, right? He just sort of says, do plan A better. And you were kind of more or less just sort of saying that is maybe a slight worry, is that it kind of leads into the whole, like, he doesn't come up against, top class managers on a regular basis, doesn't exactly have a plan B. And so maybe when he does get sort of found out, when he does get maybe outsmarted, or let's just say maybe the players just aren't really responding well to just whatever he's asked of them, on the day, can he make a little tweak? Can he sort of, change something, to make it more effective? And can he also think about what the other side is doing, right? Sometimes it's not always what you're doing, but what they're doing. And can you maybe pick that out, tell your players to sort of, exploit that and do something, a bit better or something a bit differently. And that's going to be an interesting thing about Ange as well, that I'm not saying he won't be able to do, but that's going to be probably something to be asked of you quite a lot, I think, in the Premier League, is that there will be guys that might just have, some sort of trick up their sleeve, like Unai Emery did with that really high off, defensive line and the offside trap. Let's say Ange Postecoglou comes up against that. What can he do, to sort of, plan, in the second half to be able to sort of take advantage of that, offside trap or whatever? Or is he just going to continue to do the same thing? And will that lead us to, in certain games, just sort of being left a bit frustrated? And like you brought up, a Jose Mourinho and Antonio Conte were never against sort of the, the counterattack and the power of it, because with the counterattack, you do invite teams onto you. By inviting teams onto you, there's all that space in behind to, try to punish them for it. And they were never against that. And I think Spurs fans were sort of enlightened to that, but also they seem to reject it. I think a lot of Spurs fans sort of feel like, I'd rather just meet teams toe to toe, even if we don't have the players and quality that really match it sort of toe to toe. I'd rather just see us go all out. I'd rather just see us go for them, go for their throats. And Postecoglou certainly offers that part, right? He is going to just go for the other team, even if he knows he doesn't have as good of players.
100%, Jack. Look, this whole plan B argument, I get it, right? But if you actually really sit there and deep that, what is a plan B? It's someone that overthinks. It's someone that has plans for every different situation, which means then you automatically become a counter-attacking sort of manager, because you're planning different scenarios, this, that, and the other. If you actually really sit there deep that and think about it, you more become a defensive-minded person, because you're already thinking of every scenario. So therefore, like, you don't want a manager that wants a plan B. You want a manager that more or less sticks to his principles and his philosophy, which is why people have called for a De Zerbi, a Potter, and people like that, because they stick to their principles and they stick to their philosophies. What the question should be is, can Ange adapt what he's done at Celtic to Tottenham to not make us maybe as so open? You look at Pep Guardiola. He's got he's right back now coming into midfield. Now Jurgen Klopp is starting to do it, to offer that extra body in there, to offer that bit of protection on the break. So that should be the more question about it, not so much this plan B narrative. Because if you get that, you're going into a Big Sam, Roy Hodgson, more experienced people like that are automatically from an era where the game is more defensive. So what you want is a guy that, what's plan B? Do plan A better. So basically, keep your principles and everything else, just make little adaptations throughout that, little bits of movements. And that's really what we're asking for. And for me, he'll do that.
Well, hopefully everybody enjoyed this video. I think we covered a lot here. I think we sort of covered what maybe the initial criticisms are of Postecoglou, some of the maybe statements that have gone around about why he might not be good enough, or why Spurs should be looking at better, and those sort of things. And then we also covered, right, like, what were some of the criticisms of Conte, and can we also measure that up against Postecoglou? Will Postecoglou be able to, offer some solutions to what people sort of held Conte accountable for, what people thought that he was doing wrong, right? Can Postecoglou answer some of those things that people seem to, right, consider to be very important, right, at Spurs? And it seems like for the most part, he can offer some solutions to at least a few of them, and we'll see how it goes for him. And I think one of the, at least the last sort of highlights that I'll make, is Spurs fans do want to go back to just attacking football, it seems like, at all costs. Not saying Ange Postecoglou delivers the best version of that attacking football, but he is an attacking football at all costs mentality. That is his mentality. He always has even ridiculed his players if they do, are reluctant to go forward. If they do decide to go backwards, he'll, ridicule his players for it. So at least the mentality is there with the guy. But Dave, any
Yeah.
final thoughts and any final messages for the Harris Army before we go?
Yeah, just quick final thought. Look, for me, I get why many people say it's underwhelming also because we've been used to a name like a Pochettino, a Conte, a Jose Mourinho. We've been used to names like that. And let's be honest, the Nagelsmann, a lot of the managers on the list that we've been linked with are nowhere near them sort of names, nowhere near it. And that's why many people find it underwhelming. But we also have to have a dose of reality on where we're at. We ain't bringing in a manager like that because we can't attract them, especially with the mess we're in. So where we are at is someone that's, hungry, that has an on the front foot philosophy. And basically what we need to do as well is change the outlook on the club. Right now, everything looks bleak. We're defensive. We're this, we're that. Ange Postecoglou will rebrand what we are as a football club in terms of we're a team that will go in, give it a go, and we play attack of football. And it's a start. I'm not saying Ange Postecoglou is the long-term solution. I'm not saying he's even 100% the right man. But what I am saying is let's stop some of these biased narratives about the guy because he's not from a traditional footballing nation and actually look into what he brings. And does he take what many people ask for? I think you'll find yes. And when you actually go and do a deep dive into the guy, you will find he offers very similar to what we were looking for in other managers to come in here, just a bit more experience and a bit more life experience because he's older. Another thing that goes against him is his age because he's 57. If he was 38, people would be all over this guy. They'd be looking at him completely different. And for me, is he going to come in here and win us trophies? No, I don't think so. But will he change and will he move us forward? And will it be exciting times again for at least a couple of years? You bet your bottom dollar it will be.
Looking to get in a skateboard, looking to get in some soy lattes, looking to get in some skinny jeans, Ange Postecoglou, because maybe that'll make you look a bit more attractive, I guess, to the young sort of fan base out there. Everybody, hit that like button on your way out. Please let us know your thoughts, your skepticism, your sort of criticisms, or maybe why you think Ange Postecoglou is the one and only, because there are plenty of those out there as well who absolutely love the man and absolutely will die for him. So everybody, let us know down in those comments below, please. Like I said, hit the like button on the way out, and we will be seeing you. Come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.